Do you remember when going on holiday was straightforward? Here we are about to go into another lockdown. Those holidays just seem very hard to come by, don't they? Well, a few years ago, Susan had been reading a book, and it was set in a German town called Rothenburg. And she just realised that we were about to go on holiday in Germany. Could we visit Rothenburg? She'd been so entranced by the town while reading the book. So we found ourselves going there, and we arrived right in the middle of their imperial festival. Sounds really grand. Well, Rothenburg's an almost perfectly preserved medieval city or town. It's got its walls all around it and lots of old buildings. And when the festival comes, people dress up, they do dancing, they do reenactments of battles. It's all very exciting. And they have a massive firework display. And it ends up with the walls being lit up to symbolise the burning city. One story we heard was that the festival was somehow tied up with the possibility that they were celebrating a historic event when there was a miraculous escape from the plague. Now that would be an interesting possibility, wouldn't it, right now? Some of you were looking forward to fireworks this week. How amazingly English to hold an outdoor celebration on a damp, cold, wet evening in November. But of course the date is significant. Remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. You see, I used to be a history teacher. You can see I'd learnt from the highest academic authorities how to teach these subjects. And many bonfires that we have at this time of year have got an effigy of Guy Fawkes blazing away on the top of them. Guy Fawkes was born in York in 1570. Here begins the history lesson. His father Edward was a church lawyer and a prominent Protestant in the city, but his mother Edith came from a family that included secret Catholics. At that time it was dangerous to be a Catholic. Many plots and rebellions against Elizabeth I were led by Catholics, and it led to a whole lot of torture and executions, and all sorts of terrible things happened to them. It was not a great time to not agree with the official state religion, which was the Church of England. Edward Fawkes died when Guy was just 8 years old, and his mother married a Catholic. And Guy was so impressed by the faith of his new stepfather that he converted. And at the age of 21, he went off to Europe to fight for the Catholic Spain against the Protestant Dutch. So here we have a young man, newly converted, setting off to fight the enemies of his faith. Does that sound familiar? See, these things come round again. Here's how his friends described Guy Fawkes. It's worth hearing this. He was a man of great piety, of exemplary temperance, of mild and cheerful demeanour, an enemy of broils and disputes, a faithful friend, and remarkable for his punctual attendance upon religious observance. He turned up at church on time. That's not quite the image we have of Guy Fawkes now, isn't it? And of course we know why that is. He returned to England, he was invited to join the gunpowder plot, and it seemed his bad luck was to be the only one of the conspirators who really knew anything about gunpowder. So that's why he was found under the Houses of Parliament, 36 barrels of gunpowder, all ready to blow up the king. It was state opening of Parliament, the king and the whole royal family were due to be there. So he was arrested. He was taken to the king. When asked what he was doing in the cellars, this is what he said: "I wish to blow the Scottish king and all his Scottish lords back to Scotland." He also expressed his regret at having failed. So at the time, the monarch or the Privy Council had to authorise any form of torture. James I himself wrote out the royal warrant. If he will not other ways confess, the gentler tortures are first to be used upon him, and then step by step you may employ the harsher, and so speed your good work. The good work was extremely painful. Guy Fawkes held out bravely for several days, or he held out. You may have doubts about how brave he was, but he held out. But eventually he named his co-conspirators and he signed a confession. And if you look at the signature he used on the confession, it's clear that he'd been extremely damaged by the torture he'd undergone. So their fate was grisly. 31st of January 1606, they were dragged behind a horse along the streets of London to Westminster, where one by one all the conspirators that were still alive were hanged, drawn and quartered. And then the following year, January 1606, James I passed a Thanksgiving Act to celebrate the failure of the gunpowder plot and his deliverance from danger. It was called, really innovatively, the Observance of 5th of November Act 1605. It included having a special church service, bonfires and fireworks, and the Act was in force until 1859. But the English are the English. We can still do it even when we don't have to by law. Now, the following year, there was another religious fanatic, one of a group of separatists who didn't want to acknowledge the Church of England and wanted to separate from it. Between 1607 and 1608, Thomas Helwys and Smith, Robinson and many others from Lincolnshire, they fled to the safety of Amsterdam because they were under threat. And Thomas Helwys was the wealthy one. He likely was the one who organised and paid for the group's escape to safety. And it was there that something that now is recognisable as Baptist faith became. This is the origin of the Baptists, just in case you needed to know. And Thomas Helwys was one of the founders of the First Baptist Church in 1609. They became convinced that baptism into the church should be for Christian believers only and not for infants. So in January 1609, Smith baptised himself, then the rest of his followers, starting with Thomas Helwys, the First Baptist Church. And around this time, Thomas Helwys wrote a book. It included, Around this time, Thomas Helwys wrote a book, A Short Declaration on the Mystery of Iniquity. It's not a great read. It mainly criticises every other Christian for not believing the right thing or doing the right thing. But it did include one very important thing. It included one incredibly radical idea. No one, not even the king, had the right to tell anyone what to believe. For we do freely profess that our Lord the King has no more power over their consciences than over ours, and that is none at all. For our Lord the King is but an earthly king, and he has no authority as a king, but in earthly causes. And if the king's people be obedient and true subjects, obeying all human laws made by the king, our Lord the King can require no more. For men's religion is between God and themselves. The king shall not answer for it. Neither may the king be judged between God and man. Let them be heretics, Turks, Jews, or whatsoever. It appertains not to the earthly power to punish them in the least measure. This is made evident to our Lord the King by the Scriptures. Now, despite the obvious risks, in 1613, Helwys and 12 Baptists returned to England and founded the first Baptist congregation on English soil in Spitalfields in East London. They brought the book with them and, foolishly, or what do you think, they delivered one copy to King James I. There's a handwritten inscription arguing for liberty of conscience. The king, he said, is a mortal man and not God. Therefore he hath no power over the mortal soul of his subjects to make laws and ordinances for them and to set spiritual lords over them. Helwys and the other Baptists were thrown into Newgate prison, and he died in prison around 1616 at the age of 40. So we've got Guy Fawkes, the Catholic who tried to blow up Parliament. We've got Helwys, who argued the king couldn't tell people what to believe, and he died in prison. You can see the copy of that book in the Bodleian Library if you go and ask nicely, I'm sure. And those ideas of Thomas Helwys influenced Roger Williams, who set a new colony in America, and those ideas became enshrined in the US Constitution. So I've even got a link to what's happening in America at the moment in this special week for them. My job this November is to write up the World Watch List report for Open Doors, the 50 countries where it's hardest to be a Christian. And that includes countries where the government still tells people what they can believe, and if people don't accept it, they can get into terrible trouble. Ismaili is in lockdown this year. He's 65 years old. He lives in Iran. He was accused. He started to follow Jesus nearly 40 years ago. Since then, he's been frequently harassed by the Iranian security forces. In theory, Iran's constitution says he has freedom to believe what he wants, but that's not the reality under which he lives. So he's been charged. His charge was, let me get this right, he was charged with insulting Islamic sacred beliefs in the cyberspace because he sent a message by email. And he's been sentenced to 3 years in prison. He still faces 2 other charges: propaganda against the Islamic Republic and membership of a group hostile to the regime, in other words, a Christian church. There was one charge which was dropped which might have led to the death penalty. There was one charge that was dropped that might have led to the death penalty. That's how serious freedom of religion or belief can be still in our world, long after Guy Fawkes and Thomas Helwys. The World Watch List is due to be launched in Parliament in January. So my deadline is pressing. I better get writing. When I've finished, I might just celebrate with a little mini firework display.